As a marketing professional, and especially as a writer, you will have a lot of opportunities to interact with the press. The way that you learn to communicate with journalists and people who work at news publications can be a very powerful tool or instrument to get your message out, or the message that you are writing for a client or a business, out to more people. One of the disciplines that we train on at Hire a Writer, which is my copywriting agency, is PR. Because I think that every great marketing writer needs to at least have a baseline understanding of how PR works and how to reach and communicate to journalists. So if you're interested in this, let's go through a short training. We're going to have, my training for PR has, dang it. If you are a marketing professional, and especially a writer, you will have the opportunity many times over in your career to interact with the press. And whether you are working with a PR agency or you are trying to get your message directly to a journalist or somebody who is reporting on a news item, it is important to know how to communicate with these people. There are people who want to specialize in press relations, and those people typically work at a PR agency. But at Hire a Writer, which is my copywriting agency, we train all of our writers on PR because I think it is a valuable discipline for any marketing copywriter to understand how journalists work, how journalists think, and how to actually reach journalists with a message. Sometimes getting messages and copy that you write about a business into the news is the most important way to gain visibility for somebody. So let's dive in. I'm going to take you through the first part of our PR training, and you can see how we kind of walk through and create processes around reaching people in the press with the content that we write, be it press releases or articles. Okay. So the PR training at Hire a Writer is 3-part. The first is prospecting. So, again, regardless of whether or not you're actually working with a PR agency or you're working in a PR agency, prospecting, or the ability to find where journalists hang out and communicate directly with them, is like this incredible skill. I have a couple people who are just really good at it. You got to be a little scrappy, you got to be a little dogged, but it is worth doing if you can get a direct relationship with somebody who has the ability and the platform to publish your work on a news publication. Okay. So first thing you always want to do in any prospecting activity is categorize. You want to first define the types of platforms that you want for your client or your business. Then you want to define the type of people you want. So the kind of reporters, journalists, writers that report on the right topics and for the right platforms. And then you want to define what you want to ask for. So that's pretty straightforward. And when it comes down to actually putting this into practice, the picking of your platform is really just a vetting or a shortlisting criteria. So you will, the more kind of known a business becomes, the more you're going to have people actually reaching out to you, probably as the writer or the head of marketing, to be put in the press. But it is important to vet any of this. So whether you are actively looking for places to place content, or you are trying to decide whether or not an opportunity is a good one, there are a couple of just very simple ways that you can kind of vet and shortlist the opportunities that come across your plate. So first is figuring out what reach the platform has. So a lot of times you'll get offered, get your CEO on this podcast, or get in this, we'll publish you in this publication. Many of the news publications that are going to reach out to you in that way are pay to play, first of all. So you're going to have to put some money into it. But you need to understand, before you ever put money on the line, is how much traffic a site actually gets. What are the distribution metrics? How many people do they actually reach? This actually used to be a lot easier, I will be honest with you, before digital, because we could just say, what is your distribution, right? Like, you have 300,000 subscribers. That told me something about the kind of platform it was. It can be a little bit harder now, and people kind of fudge metrics, and there are a lot of vanity metrics and a lot of bot followers and a lot of things that you kind of got to navigate through. So I like to always go back to the source, go back to the actual website itself, and just figure out, like on SEMrush or something, how many hits it gets a month from organic. And then the news the platform covers. So if you're, being asked to be on a podcast, obviously listen to the podcast. If you're being asked to, write for a blog, go read the blog. Make sure that just conceptually and contextually it makes good sense. And then the structure of the platform. So there are a couple of sites, like for instance, Forbes is really bad about this. Forbes is like smoke and mirrors. Actually getting on Forbes.com is basically not happening. But Forbes is extremely pay to play. So you can get on, and it has tons of subdomains and tons of contributors who just pay a fee in order to write for Forbes and be bylined, okay? So you have to be really careful and understand, like, am I going on the core site? How is this site structured? Are there multiple subdomains? Do there appear to be paid contributors? Because the people who know, so like actual journalists and people in the press, know. And so you have to be a little bit careful about, getting into this game blind. So that's why this vetting criteria for me is like so essential before we pursue opportunities. And then how do they accept contributions? So, when I have my people going through and shortlisting opportunities, I'm always having them say, like, figure out, is there a form? Does it go to an email address? If there's a how to contribute article, save the hyperlink. Just kind of do your due diligence and understand, like, how do people actually get published on this platform? Okay. Second category is pick your people. So this is the actual journalists. You want to start to familiarize yourself with press titles. So you've got chief editor, editor, lead writer, lead coverage, lead journalist, journalist, editorialist, freelancer, contributor, freelance contributor, staff writer, blogger, others. Find this on their company site. If you're looking for, because remember, journalism is a people game. Press is a people game. You want to find the actual people. And the higher you can get up on the food chain, the better. Because those are the people who actually have decisions. Be clear, a writer, like even a staff writer, doesn't usually get to choose what they write about, and they don't usually get to choose anything about the editorial calendar or the editorial cycle or coverage or anything like that. An editor chooses all of that, right? So it's important that you don't waste time having a lot of in-depth conversations or trying to pitch a lot to people who don't have decision-making power. So that's where it just comes down to educating yourself on what are the titles in these kind of companies. And then going down to the individual level and figuring out what else they've covered. Your best bet for coverage is to find somebody who has, or to pitch to somebody or to the editor of somebody who has recently covered something like what you want covered. So if you're trying to get a very specific story covered, find journalists who have recently written about something similar. Not exactly the same, because then they already wrote about it and they won't pick you. So just kind of use common sense and consider, what is going to be appealing to people. And remember that the sleuthing that we can do on journalists now and on coverage now is different, because not only do we have, their portfolio or their actual published work, you can go to the individual. You can find them on Twitter, you can find them on LinkedIn, you can find them on Instagram. They usually have public profiles. You can start to build relationships with them. And so that's where, you kind of begin to amplify the effect, and your vetting is more thorough and your ability to reach them is a little bit more omni-channel, because you've got a few different options of knowing where they hang out and how to find them and communicate to them. And then pick your pitch. All right, so we talked about, pick your platform, pick your person, pick your pitch. Based on everything that you learn in that due diligence process of prospecting, categorize the types of pitches that you can send to the shortlist of platform-based journalists. So I always suggest create 3 pitch ideas, and they need to be short. They have to be so short. The idea for pitching, which I'll get into in the next video, because we're gonna that's kind of the second training that we do on PR, is how to actually pitch, because that is in itself an art. But as you pitch, you're going to think about making it as contextual as possible, tailoring it to the journalist, making sure it matches what they write about, making sure it is something that they would write about, and being careful. Okay, so I think that process of prospecting and going through finding and creating great lists that address all 3 of those areas, the platform, the person, and the pitch, is mission critical, and it is where you start. If you want to create some kind of PR strategy and you don't want to use that's what a press company would do, right? That's what they do. They all have databases full of this information. If you are hyper niched, or you have a limited budget, or you simply want to explore so that you understand how all of this works, that's how you do it. You just go through, you create these lists. And so the other piece to that, obviously those are the 3 things that you're going to do as kind of your core strategies, but the where. So it's getting smarter about where you're looking. If all you're ever doing is Googling, you're not going to figure out rich enough information fast enough. It's going to be a very manual process. There are lists you can buy. There are trade, industry. You can go into some of these verticals and categorizations and find databases that have information on them, but we all know that bot lists are fraught with errors and issues. So at the end of the day, quality over quantity. You want to make sure you're finding things that are valuable, and the more you can niche, the better, and you have to start small and work up. So I would just urge you to consider, like, think outside the box as far as your actual research tools and methodologies, and consider how you're going to source and create media lists using things like Reddit, using things like Twitter, using directories, but using them in a thoughtful way so that it's not just like, I'm going to pull all the data that somebody else has made and then I'm going to pitch to all of those journalists. Do the actual manual process of the human side of getting to know them, figuring out what they write about, and figuring out how you're going to get in touch with them. All right, this is an accidental sneak peek of the next one, but basically thinking through how you're gonna pitch to people is gonna be the next phase, which I'll address in the next video. If you're interested in learning more about the entire wide world of content strategy, copywriting, and marketing that is content driven, subscribe to my channel. Feel free to go find me on Instagram. It's Joy Writer Ewell. I do a lot of videos on freelance writing and for writers and things like that. And then you can definitely go to the Hire a Writer blog. We have a whole bunch of different blogs, and many of them address kind of the business side of copywriting, the freelance side, the creative side, and all the many ways that we as writers have an incredible opportunity to grow our skill in this trade.